I'm Dr. Craig Jalquist. This is the first in a series of videos called Gnosticism for Our Time. It's kind of a cool, gloomy pre-fall day, pre-fall morning. Seems like an appropriate time to start talking about Gnosticism. So in this first video, I'll say a little bit about my background and why I'm doing this, and then talk about what is Gnosticism, and we'll continue that conversation. Not sure how many videos at least several. And they'll probably be longer than ones I've done in the past because they have to be. So my first PhD is in depth psychology, and my second one is in philosophy and religion. I've been teaching about Gnosticism for many years now. Graduate students, workshop participants, other people. I've written about Gnosticism. I've read all of the significant literature about Gnosticism as well as the Gnostic texts themselves. But it's important to remember that periodically we have new ones. They surface now and then in unexpected places, which parallels the theme of Gnosticism itself, finding wisdom, mystery, the sacred in the midst of gloom, trash, devastation. That's a key Gnostic theme that involves even the way we find Gnostic texts that have been repressed or discarded. So why I'm doing this, I just think Gnosticism is really interesting and cool, but aside from that, there's starting to be more conversation about Gnosticism online, but it's full of the usual bits of misinformation or lacking information, and I want to correct some biases. So that's part of the reason for doing this. I think Gnosticism as a wisdom tradition has a lot to say for our time. And we'll have many examples of that as we go. So what is Gnosticism? So let's roll back to the year, or actually the 2nd century CE, and we're in Alexandria. And it's a very multicultural city. There's a lot of different influences. There's a Jewish quarter. There's the whole weight of Egyptian tradition all the way back thousands of years. Persian influences. We know Buddhists were there at one point. Many other influences too. Christian influences since the time of Jesus, of course, although some scholars think that Gnosticism actually precedes Christianity. I'll say more about that in a later video. So imagine groups of people who seem to be kind of allergic to anything orthodox. And they start forming study circles because they're seekers and they're interested in direct access experientially to the divine. And they begin writing stories and speeches and homilies and letters about how to access the divine inside ourselves. So by the time they've been doing this for a bit, they start coming into collision with elements, very early elements of Christianity. And so Tertullian is one who goes after them. Irenaeus of Lyon, which is southern France, he's an early church official. And in fact, Irenaeus at one point says in scorn, well, they call themselves, or not call themselves, well, they're knowers. That's what they think they are, right? And so knowers is what Gnosticism, what Gnostics means. Gnosticism is knowledge. It's a Greek word for knowledge. And there are several Greek terms for knowledge, but the way this term gets used to apply to Gnosticism, it means direct experiential knowledge of our roots in the divine, in sacred experience. And I'll say more about that as we go too. A minor version of this, well, I shouldn't say minor, but a day-to-day version of this that a lot of us are probably familiar with is, something happens and you have this huge realization that the story of your life is somewhat different from what you've always believed. That's a moment of gnosis. So knowing through insight, knowing in a deep way, knowing what's happening under the surface of things that you've been told. That kind of gnosis and other kinds are what the Gnostics were seeking. So they're in Alexandria early on, and then they're in Rome, they're in Antioch, They're in Jerusalem. And notice that these are the same places that early Christianity gets going. And so a point that April DeConnick makes in her book, Comparing Christianities, is that around this time, 2nd century, there's no central Christianity. There's no central dogma. There are many Christianities. And one of these is the collection of study circles, prayer circles, of esoteric people who eventually get called knowers, Gnostics. So that's a little bit where it starts. And that's where our video series starts as well. So more next time.